So I was just thinking. Hey, welcome to I Was Just Thinking, a podcast about creative confidence. I don't know what that accent was. Maybe a Finnish accent, because I am Finnish, so maybe I should talk with the Finnish rally accent more. A rally accent is a thing, just Google it. Hey, today's topic is when your creative identity changes, what then? What happens when we change our creative identity? This has very much been my personal battle the last lifetime. So my whole life, especially the last 4 or 5 years, I've been really asking, like, who am I? What is my style? What is my brand? What happens to my brand if it changes? Why? How? Who am I? Okay, let's start with a pointer. Creative identity is fluid. You're allowed to outgrow tools, genres, mediums, and labels. Letting go isn't failure, it's honesty. How hard it is to take that in real life. How hard it is to accept that that's actually pretty true sentence. But in reality, I feel like it's easier to said than done. What? Microphone is falling. So let's break this down a bit. We as creatives are almost meant to think that we need to be a brand. We need to almost like sell ourselves as much as we're selling to be able to sell our art. But how does that work then? Because so many creative minds, we are multi-dimensional, multi-functioning, we have multiple interests. But how are we supposed to just then think, okay, people need to know me for this one art style fully only? Because if I create other stuff, it gets too confusing. And our identity, because art is so personal, our identity is connected to our art. So we are really easily not being able to separate what is the brand, what is all this compared to who we actually are. And then on the top of that, we have the whole world saying that you need to sell to be able to considered successful artist. Because if you don't sell, or if you don't commercialize your art, then who you are. Because if there's no receipts, then it didn't happen. Basically. Understanding how your brain works can change everything. Realizing, yes, this was a good point. Realizing I'm neurodivergent, especially through dyslexia, gave me permission to stop forcing myself into systems that were never made for me. So, I think one of the biggest, because when I've been asking this question, like about my identity in the last decade, the last years a lot, I've been also learning a lot by myself through going to therapy, but also learning about dyslexia and neurodiversity, because I'm like on a bingo card. I have a couple things on the whole neurodiverse bingo card, but dyslexia is maybe one of the most prominent things in my brain. And the other day I was reading for fun, morning reading a book about psychology, and I came across the theory from J.B. Guilford something. I think it's something Guilford, who has a theory about divergent and convergent thinking. I've been using this whole divergent and convergent thinking as a topic in my book, example, I talk about it because it's a great way of separating how our creativity works. It's explaining how creativity works. So divergent thinking is basically the brainstorming moment that we getting ideas, finding connections, problem solving. It's just like not necessarily problem solving, but it's the idea, like pulling ideas and just letting them exist. Where divergent thinking is taking those ideas and putting them into some kind of guidelines, structure, putting them together, finding the connection, finding structure between these ideas, and then putting it towards what the goal is. And this made me realize when I kind of got to the whole a little bit more to read more about this, is that divergent thinking is basically the main way that dyslexic people think. So our primary way to actually process information is just divergent thinking. So it's only about pulling out ideas, but not too much about putting them into structure or conclusion. So that's why for me it's really hard to conclude things or summarize things or talk things in a very systematic way in here, because my brain is not built that way. And why do I talk about this in an episode that is about identity changing? It's because realizing how my brain works has really been a validating experience, but it's also explained it a lot to me. And because I understood how my brain works and what works for me, it's really let me understand my identity versus the music industry. So as a musician, I realized that as someone who, is very dyslexic, who constantly just processes everything with divergent thinking, naturally, as an artist, I can't really, if I start asking money or if I start marketing my art and limiting it into certain construct, like I just need to be melodic house, I just need to be in this genre, is not going to work for me, because my brain is not built at all like that. So playing, like I've been talking in this podcast a lot before about the rules of the industries and our choice to choose if we want to play those rules or not. And I've realized that as an artist, I physically can't play those rules on long term. I can have a project like making a track per month, every single month in a year, because that is the that gives me structure and it gives me guidelines and it forces me to summarize these things into in a time frame. So to be able to do convergent thinking, I need to have workflow, structure, guidelines. But in the long term, just as an artist, I can't conform into certain genres or certain systems. That's why I have needed to understand that my identity and my music and genres, I need to stop asking money from it. I need to stop commercializing it. And what works for me better as an artist to earn money is, example, writing music for movies or theater or something, because it's very clear goal. It's very clear, like, why are we here for? So I can use my skills and my creativity and the way that I'm very divergent thinking. So I just have ideas. I don't take them personally when I'm doing a commissioned work. So example, if I make a movie music, the director will be like, hey, I want this kind of track. Can you make it? I go in, I start making my track for whatever kind of guidelines they have given me. And then they give feedback and they say, okay, actually, we need to change this and just change that. I see that as, I don't take it personally. I see that as a challenge, a way to kind of problem solve. So for me, that is really enjoyable way of using my creativity. But then as an artist, as LNA, I don't have those guidelines if I don't put them in. So I can't I have decided that for me, LNA needs to be more like a experiment, more of an experiment than a job. So I guess like now the how identity have then changed in social media and branding is that I don't need to have branding for LNA because it's just me making music. So the goal, the structure has changed that I have created for my creativity. I really hope this is making some sense to you because that was very long story short. But again, that's how my brain works. So basically, my point was that figure out how your brain works and that will help you to determine what kind of jobs and how you should use your creativity, whether that is more money or just for hobby or what works for your creativity. Bloody hell, that was so long story short. Hey, let's take a letter at this point because because otherwise I'm going to get to another monologue and I don't know. Well, that's the whole point of this podcast, is to be a monologue. Hey, Liina, I've been listening to your podcast during a strange transition in my creative life. I used to be a singer-songwriter, writing for myself, performing live and all of that. But lately I've been moving into sound design and composition for media. What? That's literally me. That's how I am. Is this me? It feels right creatively, but part of me still wonders if I've abandoned something essential. I catch myself thinking, am I still an artist if I'm not singing my own stories, anymore? Or have I just disappeared into something more anonymous because it feels safer? Your podcast has helped me sit with those questions instead of pushing them away. I'm slowly learning that shifting directions doesn't mean I've lost my identity. Maybe it means I'm finally expanding it. Thanks for holding space for that. Damn. This was like my story, I felt like, this year. That's exactly how I've been feeling. I feel like thank you for sharing in the first place. Thank you for telling us that. I think where my whole basically in the last spring when my book was coming out, I had this most stressful time that I've had for years. I was so stressed. And because I was stressed, I feel like I was so existential. I was going through a lot of thoughts. And because I was tired, my hormones were absolutely ridiculously shit. So everything was just very vulnerable and emotional. And inside of this, my whole identity thing was crashing because for years, my identity had been built around my YouTube channel, Liina Does Audio Stuff. I felt very much like that's what people know me as. So that's who I am. I felt like I am Liina Does Audio Stuff and it is me. It was the same thing. So if people know me as a certain thing, I can't be anything else. And inside of me, I was feeling that I'm everything else but that. No, not everything else, but teaching. I've never seen myself as teacher. I enjoy it and I think it's fun, but I need to do it in limits because but I can't have it as my whole personality and my whole identity because for me, I needed to realize that for me, teaching is way to earn an income. It's an enjoyable way to earn income, but that's what it is. But I had a need to feel more as an artist. So that's the whole point why last year I was doing 1 track a month, because I needed to find and create space for myself to separate who am I outside of being a educator online. I needed to find my artistic voice, which I did. And I'm so glad I did that. And that separation, I needed to force myself to go and do something else and believe that that's where I belong because it felt good. But hardest part of all this is that it's taken a lot of self-control and overcoming fear to get to the points where I have started to find who I want to be and what I actually am. Because it felt like I was starting again. And there was a lot of shame and fear in it because I'm in my almost mid-30s. And I felt like, starting this whole I was just thinking or Liina thinks stuff on social media, it felt like cringe, it felt embarrassing, it felt like, who am I to talk about all this? And yeah, it felt like I was starting again. And it was so far from the identity that I've already built on social media. And I think the key is to follow whatever makes you happy, what brings you joy. And for me, figuring out my artistry as a musician has brought me joy, and also talking about creator confidence stuff brings me joy. I don't know where they're going to fully lead yet, but starting projects like podcast or starting more like writing for film, music, or interactive sound design, all of those are already starting to like lead into other things because I started them. So you need to start something even if it doesn't lead anywhere yet, to figure out if that's what you like to do. This might completely go out into a different topic. No, it's not different topic. I promise that this will make sense why I talk about this next thing. When people talk about when people talk about finding yourself or finding your thing, we are very often taught that we need to find that one thing, we need to do that for the rest of our lives, and then we will retire. That's kind of the old-fashioned way of thinking, and that's still being put into our head. So then when we change things, we feel like we're starting again, there's shame, or when we're changing things, we don't know fully what we want yet, but we're too afraid to go and explore what it is. So what I've been thinking for a while is that how I like thinking about this is that picture a forest. And what we've been thinking is that you go into the forest and you find one tree with fruits that you like. And you keep on going to that tree for the next 30, 40 years, and you keep on taking the fruits from that one tree. And one day you decide that you retire from that and you, I don't know, go somewhere else. My metaphor is not extending that far. So that's what we've been taught. There is just one tree that we need to find in a forest full of trees. And some people struggle finding that tree. They struggle because they're curious of other trees as well, or they feel like pressure because that one tree seems to be, the forest is so big and you just can't keep on walking around forever and finding that tree. So it becomes very embarrassing to be 40 years old and still find that one tree. So instead of thinking that there's a one tree, maybe we can start to think that there is many trees. So you go into the forest, you see a tree that has nice fruits, you start picking those fruits, but then you see that there's another tree that has nice fruits as well. You go and pick those up. And during the years, you've been picking up maybe 10, 20, 30, 40 different trees, different fruits. And some of them you didn't like, some of them you liked. But maybe there's like 1 to 5 to 10 trees that you keep on always going back to. You keep on going back to those trees and picking those ones. And that's how I see my life. I see that I go through life being scared because it's just an emotion and it happens. And I go around trying to find different trees. But I have found that for me, there is now about 2 to 3 trees that I really like, that I keep on going back to. And when I became self-employed, many people were like, oh, but it's so scary to be self-employed because, you know, you never know what's going to happen to your work and so on. But I actually feel more stable now than I did when I was employed by somebody else. Because when you're employed by somebody else, you're going to that one tree. But what happens if that tree burns down? What happens if you don't like those fruits anymore that comes from that tree? You have that one, and then you need to get the courage to start exploring what other trees there are. It's very scary. Not impossible, but it's scary. Because you're not used to go around the forest and figuring out and finding different trees. And personally, I feel like now, because I've gone around so long and finding different trees, and now I found 2 to 3, if one of them burns down, I still have 2 left. And I now know I have the courage to go around and find others. So my point is that maybe we need to start thinking about jobs and hobbies and everything and give them also same amount of respect. Is that some of those hobbies might be just trees that we like the fruits from and we like going there once in a while. Sometimes that can turn into a job, and that's great, or passive income. And sometimes we just need to my husband just came home and I need to probably finish this episode because now I'm too distracted to continue. But that was basically the point. I feel like that was a really much about it's okay. Let's finish up with one of the pointers in the end. One of the pointers is changing your art doesn't mean losing your identity. It might be the moment you are truly it might be the moment you truly meet it. Your audience may shift, but your authenticity will resonate deeper. And I feel like that's a perfect place to end. Wait, let me see if there's a clarity on yourself creates calm. Yes, this is what, okay, this one still, because we talked about first about getting to know your brain, and then we talked about like finding your thing, and that actually there doesn't need to be one thing, there could be many things. But clarity on yourself creates calm. When you know your own rhythm, limitations, and creative flow, you can design a life and practice that supports you, not just the outside world. And I think that's beautiful. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna finish this episode here, and come and send me stuff, your letters at Liina Things, Liina Things. And I will see you here next week in another podcast episode. And hopefully you have a lovely, lovely day.